right, let's get moving here a little early.
This is this between us.
The number one podcast in the world.
This is
the JBU Show featuring Austin,
from the Miller Talk Podcast,
ALLAN,
the American Sincerist.
and now your host,
Cam Allen.
Fascistic tendencies in the United States. America has always been a fascist country. We're fighting fascistic tendencies in the United States.
It feels almost like a dictatorship.
Since you hate America, here's a one-way ticket out.
Not coming back.
We're here at Harvard asking students how they feel about America and if they would revoke their citizenship and take a one-way ticket to leave and never return.
So let's start with, what do you think of your country?
It's been getting really crazy.
America has always been a fascist country.
It feels almost like a dictatorship in some ways.
And also with the ICE thing, goddamn, there's so much more going on with America.
Our civil rights were revoked.
I don't know if we'll survive Trump's presidency, man.
You think America is a fascist country?
A lot of people would say that.
Why do you think it's fascist?
A lot of people feel like they cannot exercise their freedom of speech or freedom of religious practice or expression. If
What
you
are you
critique the
doing
government,
right
if
now?
you speak out, there's a chance the president will tweet about you and attempt to harass you.
You still have these
no.
checks and balances and systems, yet people still think it's not a democracy. Why is that?
With our current president, those checks and balances have been violated in some ways. Like, it makes me feel uneasy.
What is the number one thing that you guys would change in your country immediately without even thinking twice about it?
Immigration laws.
You guys want to expand on that?
I just think it's really inhumane what is going on right now in this world. This is stolen land already, and if you're going to make arguments about people that are and aren't allowed to be here, I don't think it holds any value. And I
You think it's a stolen land?
I think that
The first thing I would do is
It's
remove
funny
ourselves
that
from
the
foreign
second there's a
conflicts.
tiny
Even
bit
if
of
one
pushback,
dictator's
all of a
bad,
sudden
we're
it just
hearing one side of the
disappears.
story.
I think the United States has broken international law, undermining the sovereignty of places like Iran and Venezuela.
Do you think the situation is that bad that people would be interested in revoking their citizenship and moving?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it safe to say you hate America and aren't proud to be a citizen?
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
I mean, yeah.
Is there any country you would rather live?
Copenhagen and
Copenhagen.
I would go to Ireland.
New Zealand.
If we gave you one-way ticket, would you take to leave America and to move to New Zealand? To Ireland. Belfast, I think. Completely move out of the country. Not coming back.
I did just get into Harvard. That's a really hard question.
No, I think by the end of the day, we're still stuck in this together.
I have obligations.
All right,
I got
awesome.
family here. I got
Awesome.
school here.
All right, fine. We'll take that as a no.
Practically, I think it would probably be a poor idea.
Like, there is still, like, a lot of good opportunities in America.
Born and raised in America. My whole family's here. My whole life is here. This has been home. This is opportunity. I'll never be able to take that away from, the place that I was born in.
When given a real chance to leave, no one takes it. It's easy to criticize a system you benefit from, but when that system is taken away, the reality becomes a little more complicated.
Shout out to Think Again
America has always
for doing that. It's amazing how simple. Just the simplest questions sometimes, when it's presented to you immediately like that. I mean, we all, we know people say stuff like that all the time and they don't mean it, but how's it going, everybody? My name is Chris, and this is the JBU Show, and we're just going to do a short episode tonight. Going to keep it very brief since it wasn't planned or scheduled or anything anyway, but we do like to be here, at least on the weekends, for you guys. We're going to look at the highlights from the SpaceX launch because I thought it was cool, and it'll kill some time. But don't worry, just the highlights. We're not going to watch the whole hour and a half. I'll just show you all the critical parts. So if you missed that, you'll know what everybody's talking about. If you happen to be in those circles, a few other things going on. There was apparently another shooting at the White House today. So I'll give you the details on that. And then, depending on how much time and all that, we got a few other things. Let's go ahead and jump right into the highlights from the Starship launch the other day, which was very cool to watch. I know that this isn't the first time that SpaceX has put a camera on a rocket and allowed, us to view the entire launch. but this first one I've witnessed all the way through. And it's just it's a cool perspective, and it shows you a little bit about how some of this is done, and really, I think, highlights the magnitude of work that it takes to put something in space. We obviously overlook that quite a bit these days, since there is so much junk flying around us at any given time. But assuming I don't get taken down by X for showing too much of SpaceX's content, hopefully they won't mind. We're going to try and do this here. So I'm going to jump right ahead to launch. And you know how this works. I don't have a team to do this for me, so I apologize if I accidentally show you a little bit ahead before we get there, but all right.
Essentially, the point of
that puts us at T-minus. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit. Let's see. That puts us at T-minus 1 minute. I wanted to get more like T-minus 30 seconds. Oop, look at that. I almost went too far. All right, so here's T-minus 21, and you'll see right here we have liftoff, max Q, which I believe, and they'll tell us here, but I believe that's maximum takeoff pressure, or maybe speed. And then stage separation, that is where the booster is going to separate from the rocket. Like I said, they'll explain through most of this stuff. But yeah, so that's separation happens at 2 minutes 28 seconds after takeoff, so we'll probably watch to that point before we jump ahead. All right, I'll shut up and let you watch the launch here. You can see this on SpaceX's page, by the way. Really? Really? We're going to do this right now while I'm live? All right, hang on, guys. I literally practiced this just to make sure this wasn't going to be a problem. But you can see I've got the beautiful little ring here. Give me just a second. God dang. Maybe they did stop me from playing it. All right, let me refresh. That had worked so smoothly too. All right.
Yesterday with the Starship
engine wiggle sounds of the first flight of Starship version 3.
Too, but that's all right. Here we go. All right, so I believe there's a brief pause here at T-minus 40. Yep. They hadn't quite finished fueling up yet.
We are holding. We were just waiting for the fuel pushbacks to complete into the prop farm. We did hear that did just complete.
It's worth noting they were not planning
that hold
on recovering the spacecraft on this launch. And I don't think they were planning on recovering the booster either. But either way,
hold is reset. Clock is rolling.
Flight directors go for launch.
There you go. 21 seconds.
Minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, ignition.
Absolutely incredible. And if you've never gotten to visit NASA before and been in the room where they simulate a rocket taking off, let alone be one of the lucky few to witness it, everything within a few miles shakes. That's what you can hear in the background. You can hear the rafters shaking there. It's absolutely insane, the power coming from these things. This rocket, liquid oxygen and methane fueled, I believe.
Flight C at 33 out of 33 Raptor 3 engines on booster V3, ascending over the Gulf now, coming up on maximum aerodynamic pressure.
Booster and ship, avionics power, telemetry nominal.
The maximum aerodynamic pressure, that's what the max Q is.
Systems looking good. We're just passing
over 1,000 kilometers
through the
an hour.
maximum dynamic pressure.
You'll see all engines are lit currently, but one of them will fail here in just a
little
moment.
over a minute into flight now. Vibrations chilling out here at Star Factory as we continue to watch Starship Flight 12 arc out over the Gulf. The next major thing coming up is going to be hot staging.
Booster prop systems nominal.
Reminder, we do what's our version of MECO. Most engines cut off, so we're going to shut down all but 5 of the Raptor engines on the booster. And then after that happens, we're going to ignite the 6 engines on ship while it is still attached. We have clamps that hold the 2 together. Those are going to retract inside of that hot stage ring.
Obviously, it's a fisheye lens.
Looks like we had one of the engines go out, still flying on 32 of the Raptor engines.
On the bottom left.
Once we get the hot staging, those 6 engines on the ship are going to ignite. We're going to do it in a little bit different of a sequence on version 3. Essentially, those 3 RVAC engines will ignite first. Almost immediately after, just one of those central engines is going to ignite, and that's going to give the booster a bit of a kick, sending it in a known direction, followed shortly after by the other 2.
Now there's only 5 engines on the booster.
Separation.
And they're going to separate the ship from the booster.
There you go. Successful hot staging separation.
Oh, and I forgot
to pull up. We're not seeing as many booster engines ignite as we expected for boost back.
I'm going to leave this up a little longer than I intended.
We are seeing 6 good engines lit on ship.
But I want to see if I can pull up the photo.
It looks like we just had an early boost back shutdown.
Incredible.
Again, a reminder: the booster was planned to essentially head into the Gulf for a splashdown, but it has shut its engines down early on into boost back. And we just see one of the RVAC, so we're now running on 5 engines on ship. We do have engine out capability, so it's going to continue into its ascent.
So we'll see the booster fall to the ground here.
You got booster on the left there, ship on the right.
What did I do with
avionics power and
we are
telemetry
not
nominal.
planning on bringing the booster back for this flight, as this was the very first time.
Figures. Well, I'll have to look it up here.
All right, so we're about 3 minutes 50 seconds into today's flight.
On my computer.
Just a reminder that the ship planned to burn its engines for about 8 minutes and change. About 8 minutes and 11 seconds was our planned timeline for today. That could shift slightly as we do have 1 engine out, running on 1 fewer RVACs. Again, continuing to watch. So booster did not complete its boost back burn. We did not see all of the engines ignite that we expected. Are continuing to get some views from it, though. That's going to make a splashdown somewhere in the Gulf.
Ready. The booster's going to
Reminder,
hit
we clear air,
at
sea
5
space,
minutes
everything
and 44 seconds. So at
for
this
these
point, we're going
launches.
to wait for that. That's when it's going to splash down in the water. So we'll wait for that, and then we'll jump ahead to the next critical juncture here. While I try and figure this out.
All right, so we are coming up on T plus 5 minutes. Ship continuing to fire 5 of the 6.
All right, good
Standing by for callouts, making sure ship's on its planned trajectory. Again, we are planning a suborbital trajectory for the ship today. Booster giving us some views as it continues to make its way back down towards the water.
You can see the water starting to approach faster and faster here. Well as this ship.
Right,
so for those that don't
over
know,
5.5 minutes in
you'll
flight.
see the flat
KTH, you
earthers
guys
a lot
with me? It looks
talking
like
about how
boosters
these rockets
starting
take
to come
off,
in hot.
and it looks like they head over towards
Yeah,
the
we had
triangle.
the opportunity to stand outside to watch
they
launch,
take off
and
they
wow,
arc,
that was incredible.
following the rotation of the Earth
that
in order
was
to get up
really loud, really shaky,
speed.
and I was actually surprised how fast the booster got off the pad or the whole stack. That was quite incredible.
Absolutely.
I'll talk
So we
more
have
about it
views here
when-
from the
in a
booster
moment here.
coming back down,
All right,
making
so here
its
it
way
comes.
into
Apparently, I was a little
the
off
Gulf.
on booster splashdown.
Pretty cool to
We have
see.
healthy chamber pressures on 5 out of 6 Ship Raptor engines.
Great news there
Landing
for
startup.
Starship.
That's gonna hit the water here in a second.
Once again, we were not going to bring the super
So
heavy
there you can
booster
see
back
right
to
as
the
it hit the
tower.
water.
We were planning on having it land in the Gulf.
Pretty gentle. It was pretty impressive. So the Seco that you see showing up on the timeline down here,
And it looks
I'll put it
like
on full
the
screen.
booster ended its mission there in the Gulf.
That is the second engine cutoff. We're not going to watch for that. Now, only 5 of the 6 engines on the ship itself ignited. They ended up having a failure of one of the engines, so they had to run longer than expected. You can see the little dots down here at the bottom. It was one of the larger engines that did not turn on, but they were able to complete the mission regardless. There was enough redundancies in place that they were able to do that. All right, let's skip ahead now to what's next. Launching the payload. So this,
And again, all these great views brought.
I'm gonna leave that muted for a second. This Starship was bringing up 44, well, I guess 42 test satellites, and it was also bringing up 2 real satellites. And the really
Brief
cool
hold.
thing about those test satellites is they actually installed cameras on them because they wanted to get a view of the other side of the ship. Obviously, the places that they can put these cameras that maintain the live stream view are limited. And so they wanted a view of the ship as the satellite was being launched, the payload was being launched, of it coming away from the ship. They wanted to be able to see that. And not only were they able to do that, but they were actually able to put it into the live stream, very shortly after too, which is truly incredible. Even by today's technology standards, without Starlink, that wouldn't be happening. I'm gonna back up just a short hair here because I don't see exactly what's going on. Oh, okay. It's funny. It looks like it's about to splash down in the ocean. I'm like, what? How the hell we get that far? Anyway.
5:30 p.m. We did have a
So,
brief
the
hold
payload
at
is
the
going to
T-minus
start
40
launching
second
here in just a
period, but we
minute.
were able
And
to
it's kind of a long
proceed through
period that it
that, and we
launches,
saw
so we'll
a
watch it
gorgeous
start,
liftoff.
and then I'll get towards
Jake
the
and I were
end
able
where
to
those,
stand outside and witness
special
that with
satellites
all of
are
our
launched, so we
colleagues,
can actually see
and
that.
what a moment. I'll tell you what, it is a heck of a lot louder out here than it was at Ad Astra.
Absolutely. And a couple things I noticed on the way uphill
they
today on the
took
ship.
off-
So obviously it looks like we lost one of the RVACs on the way, but
Hold on, let's see what he has to say.
that is a good way to demonstrate our potential engine out capability there. So
exactly.
I think we
Okay,
actually
so he's
saw
talking about the engine going out.
gimbling engines kind of gimbal over a little bit to compensate for that offset and thrust. So
They took
that
off
was really cool. That's something
from
I know
Houston,
the team's
Texas,
been,
on an
we've
arc
analyzed that since
following
flight 1 all
just
the way
below
back.
orbit,
So,
sub-Earth
it's
orbit, I
something
think
that
it's
we've
called.
thought about quite a bit, and it was kind of cool to see it in action.
With the goal of
in real
splashing
life
down
today.
in the Indian Ocean.
Absolutely.
In a very
If you couldn't
specific
tell,
spot.
Jake is
We'll
on
see
the
how
Raptor
close
team.
they got to
Yeah.
where they were intending on
But,
landing.
hey,
Because
one
that
non-Raptor
in
thing I
itself
noticed also
is
back on
impressive.
the,
You'll notice
when
the
we had
ship
the
is
shot of
going
the aft
26,000
flaps, it's a little,
kilometers an
little
hour
weird. We have
compared to
tiles
surface.
on the leeward
That's
side,
insane.
So, not on the side where we're going to see
and that's
heating.
part of
And you
why
might be asking,
there's
why are we
so
putting tiles
much
there?
heating when these things
I had
come
the same
back in,
question,
because you have to
actually.
slow
So
it back
I
down.
talked to some of our heat
In
shield
order for it to
engineers the
stay
other
in
day,
orbit, it's got to be
and
going
we're
that
actually running-
exorbitant
here's the shot right
speed.
here. Great.
But when you're
So
coming back to
the
Earth,
fact that we're
obviously,
seeing
you
all
can't
these
maintain
tiles
that
still on
speed
the
in
flap
the
right now
atmosphere.
is really good, because that actually was one of our
That's why there's
experiments
so
where we
much
wanted
heat
to test
generated. That's what
different
all these
connection
different
methods,
tiles
on
are
the
for, and
way
you can
uphill
see
on
he's
ships,
talking
so
about
actually
testing
ascent.
different connection
So
methods. You can see these
it looks
tiles
like
spaced
most,
out
if
over
not all
here.
the tiles are still
These are
hanging
all
on there,
tests.
so that's actually a really
basically,
good data point.
where they're
Looks pretty
testing
good to
different
me.
ways of mounting them, as you just said.
Now, once again, this view is from the
Looks
side
like,
of
again,
its
my
position
timing was off
flight.
just a little bit, so let's
Here,
jump
we're
forward
gonna-
just a hair. You should be able to see a door open here on the ship in a few seconds. There you go, the door's opening.
All right, so we're a little over 17 minutes into flight. If you're just now catching up with us, we did see a liftoff right at the top of our window. Super Heavy getting off the pad, initially lighting all 33 of those Raptor engines, got through a successful hot staging. Initially lit 6 engines on ship, had 1 RVAC go out on the way uphill, but still able to make it into space. And right now we're trying to see if we are going to get into payload deploy still. We're coming up right on the part of the timeline when we were expecting it. You'd look inside a Starship there. Oh, I see a door opening.
Oh, okay. There's the door opening. My bad.
Looks like Hal didn't wait. Pez door is open. Just a reminder, we've got 22 deployables in the payload bay today. 20 of those Starlink mass simulators, and then 2 are Dodger dogs, so we like to call them.
Apparently all my numbers are off.
Sitting up their modified V2 Starlink satellites.
I swore they said 40 something. Maybe it's 44.
Those are going to be testing a bunch of
they
components that we're planning to fly on Starlink V3, and we've also got them outfitted with a number. One of the only ways you can do that.
So this is what he's been referring to as the Pez dispenser. I'll put it up full screen real fast. And you can see each one of these little plates here is a satellite, and they're going to start launching out one at a time.
You got something else flying near it, so we're going to attempt
we'll watch that start.
Our
and then you'll see that the last 2
satellites
or the last
going out the door have a suite of cameras on them that are going to be looking back at the ship. We're going to be in nighttime, and so we've got. Oh, sounds like we're getting into payload deploy. We'll be in nighttime. They've got some powerful flashlights on them to try and illuminate the ship's heat shield while we fly away from it. So
they're often referred to as that. It looks like dust particles.
Some Pez motion.
Here you go. You're going to see the satellite launch here. You can see all this flying around. So according to people smarter than me, that's mostly ice. Just from little bits of moisture and stuff, obviously freezing when it gets to space. So there you go, there's the first satellite deployed. And the rest of the process basically looks the same. I think instead of skipping ahead this time, what we'll do is we'll fast forward to the last one. You can kind of see it happen a little faster. Obviously, the SpaceX crew very excited that their hard work's paying off here.
The satellite's going to move out a little bit quicker than they did on previous Starship flight tests. So first 2 out the door, 2 more on their way out. All right, 4 down, 18 to go.
But I got all. Oh, there we go. Okay. Let's say I got all messed up here. So I am going to skip ahead a little bit because it is more than a few minutes. So there, those 2 on top, those were the 2 unique satellites. We're going to skip ahead to
more of those simulators to go out.
That final one. Okay, so not this one, but the next one. There you go. So these 2 are going to head out, and they're going to take a picture of Starship on the way back. And just a few seconds, I will be able to show you that video that it took as it left the aircraft, or spacecraft.
Flies slowly away from the vehicle. And there it goes.
So there it goes. You can see the light turn on from the camera.
Yeah, it almost looks like the light is shining right at us there.
All right.
If you couldn't tell, we're pretty excited.
Yeah.
It is always sunny in space.
Always sunny in space.
We're gonna
and
go
that's like an empty payload bay. So that's exactly right.
Be right here. So the rest of the time is basically just flight time to get where it needs to go to touchdown. Other than, like I said, you know, them showing this. So here you go. There is the video of the satellite leaving. There's the flashlight turning on. So they are able to capture this unique view of the other side of the craft in space, as well as the dark side of space.
Very cool. All right, so surprise.
Looks They're going to show it one more time.
With both of those satellites. We're going to roll that back.
It's crazy to me. It looks like that ship looks like a manta ray.
From one of those satellites as we deployed, it looks like this was from the last one out. Flashlight turning on, taking a look at Starship in space. The way this system is set up is the satellites are essentially recording it, then making contact with our Starlink constellation, and then transferring that video back down to us on the ground. That's a Starship in space. aside from just being
Very
really cool, this was our test to try and develop a free flyer that we could fire outside of Starship's payload bay, look back at it, and then do essentially a pirouette.
All right, so now we're gonna jump forward to re-entry, and during re-entry, this is when obviously the spacecraft re-enters the atmosphere. It gets extremely hot, and you're gonna see a ton.
That's one we've been chasing for a while, so really cool to see.
If you listen to a video, there's some video from NASA of astronauts coming back, and there's just listening to the video is utterly terrifying, the noises and stuff that are happening, but you can really get a sense of just the extreme amount of heat that this craft goes through, because remember, it's going 26,000 kilometers an hour right now, which is, I don't know, 19,000 miles an hour or something like that, maybe.
To really put a lot of pressure on them, so we'll see how it does that maneuver, and then we'll be doing kind of a final banking.
And it's got to get rid of all of that speed before it lands, and so that's where all of the heat is generated as it re-enters the atmosphere. So let's go ahead and skip forward to re-entry here. Going to be T+48. There we go. So re-entry started, and this is actually plasma building up. Don't ask me exactly how that works. I'm not good with physics, but it's actually plasma that builds up on that surface, and that's why that one side is all covered in those tiles.
Yeah, those views were incredible.
And we'll see some images too. Those test tiles that they were testing, we'll be able to see. They're on the other side of the ship. They're not on the hot side, but we'll be able to see those. I think one of them flies off at some point. You know, not super interesting unless you really nerd out on this stuff, but kind of cool.
18 million pounds of thrust that we had off 33 of those Raptor engines. Just a little. Just a little. We're now in another, several minute burn on the ship. We're now basically undoing all that energy here via aerodynamic braking, essentially. And of course, Starlink is a big part of it, as that's what allows us to actually.
You can see down there at the bottom the angle of the ship.
And again, the data gathering is really the main reason.
Oh, you can't see it because the logo. There you go. On the bottom of the screen there, you can see the angle of the ship right there.
Through re-entry, we'll collect valuable data on the spacecraft flying through the Earth's atmosphere at these hypersonic speeds, which is basically more than 5 times the speed of sound.
Plasma is absolutely insane. All right, let me figure out how far we can fast forward here a little bit without.
Because it's re-entering at or
blowing past the vehicle are concurrent. So pretty crazy. We went all the way from Texas to the Indian Ocean in less than an hour.
You can see it goes through this for a long period of time. We've only gotten down to 22,000 kilometers, and we're what?
Right, so the light show continuing.
6-7 minutes into this. There you go. There you can see the test patches.
Probably going to be the spiciest of entry today. As a reminder, we are going to be doing
as well as the top side here. And SpaceX has apparently been testing all sorts of like stress tests of which ones can they remove and which ones, can the hull survive if they lose it. What are the best ways to attach them, as they're doing there, obviously. Again, only interesting if you geek out on this stuff, but
we are expecting at least 2
cool to me, I guess.
to try and ignite for landing burn. We entered the entry period in a good attitude, so hopefully making our way to the targeted splashdown point.
Okay, what am I looking for here?
Should be about 10 minutes away from splashdown. So a lot of excitement over the next couple of minutes. Kate and Jake, let's see how Starship holds up on the way in.
Yeah, and we just heard
all right,
there that
so I just don't want to go past 137.50, so we'll just kind of skip forward a couple times. You can see how extreme the heating gets in a couple places. This little fin right here ends up glowing red here pretty soon. We'll see. You can see it's glowing here. They'll get to a peak temperature point a ways down here, but it's still a little ways to go, I believe. There you can see this is glowing red now.
We're now past that period of peak heating, and that now the external temperatures are starting to decrease.
So there you go. They're past the point of preheating at this point, or peak heating. All right, so let's skip forward to touchdown because that's where the excitement happens.
We've got 2 of these
So remember, this has just gone through extreme heating, and even though the ship was protected from that extreme heat, even though the ship was protected from that extreme heat, it still got very hot. That's often why when astronauts come back, for example, they can't immediately get into the craft because it's still hot as hell. That steel would still melt your skin off if you touched it right now, not to mention the tiles themselves are extremely hot. That sort of explains what we're going to see here in a minute. Another thing that they mentioned during this flight, one thing they're doing right now is just before they get to the bottom, they're pitching the rocket to like maximum braking that they can do. They're stress testing, because that's what this whole thing is about. It's a big test to see, how much stresses they can put on it before they put bodies in there or serious payloads. I don't know if bodies are ever going in this particular version of Starship or not, but payloads are, obviously. But anyway, I'm going to pause real quick so we don't get past it. One thing that they note during the time that I skipped is that there's some fuel left over because that one engine wasn't burning. And I think that also explains some of what we're going to see here, because you'll notice. I'll wait till it happens.
Starship is turning for final approach to landing site.
Look at that turn.
There we go.
Okay, so it's going to happen very quickly here.
Yeah, Starship doesn't fly like an airplane. It's a lot more like a skydiver. Full belly flop on the way down, using those flaps similar to arms to help change the path of the air over you. Coming up real soon. Again, going for landing.
And this is where you can see, I mean, incredible how accurate they're able to do this.
Landing burn startup. 2 engines lit.
There's it coming down. It rotates to 90 degrees. And look at that, right next to the boat. Stands 90 degrees, falls over, and a beautiful explosion. I'm guessing that has to do with the contradiction of the superheated fuel immediately hitting the cold water or something along those lines. Obviously, they were very happy about it.
Absolutely wild.
I apologize, I forgot that was still in 2-speed. Let's watch that again in regular speed here. There you go. You can see it's a nice gentle touchdown too. So they easily could have recovered this craft with the technology they had on board. Incredible. Quite the fireball. So there you go. There's the highlights. You saw everything major that happened on the flights. Great job, obviously. Awesome how excited they are about their years of hard work blowing up.
Absolutely wild. You know, at the beginning of the show, we guaranteed excitement at the beginning of the show, and I'd say Starship delivered.
Absolutely. An incredible day for Starship. That was the first flight of that completely redesigned vehicle.
All right. You want to watch it, you can go watch it on the SpaceX feed. And if they don't demonetize this video, thank you for letting me show as much as I did. Anyway. You know, it's funny to me that there are some people that are so, like, they cannot separate their hatred for Elon Musk from SpaceX itself, which obviously, you know, it operates at the direction of Elon Musk. But there's also like 1 million people that work there and do incredible things. And for whatever, you know, everything is a failure and nothing works great. Everything went to plan here. You had a couple engine failures, but it did not offset the schedule. They had enough redundancies in place that it took place exactly as expected. Everything happened exactly as they expected it to. And, you know, there's nobody other than NASA that has the track record that they do. And considering the timeline that SpaceX has had, that's insane. Because they pushed through all their mistakes at a speed that NASA could only dream of back in the day. NASA had plenty of failures too, but they went through all those before they decided, okay, we're going to put, you know, men on one of these. Whereas, or even, you know, significant payloads. And SpaceX, on the other hand, is just pushing through the payloads and the failures. It's a different model, obviously, and since there aren't people on board, that's, you know, it's obviously worked out for them to occasionally lose a rocket. That's just going to happen. But I think it's incredible what they've done. And of course, you know, it's hard not to be happy that ground is still being broken in the United States. Anyway, let's cover this story just because I haven't had a chance to yet this week. You probably heard that I don't remember who it was. We'll find out in this story here in a second. I want to say the WHO, but I know that's not right. but whoever it is, whatever authority, revoked their climate catastrophe standards. And I found this interesting Vox article. Shout out to... Who sent this to me? Steve Guest, at Steve Guest on X, who pointed this out. They kind of admit that they just lied to you. And that this was never really a possibility. And he does kind of try and like walk it back a little bit towards the end of the article. There's obviously going to be things I don't fully agree with in this article, but it gives us some of the details about the RCP 8.5, which is basically the catastrophic warming. This is what the climate scientists were saying is the absolute worst case possible that's going to happen. Well, now they no longer, they're saying that that's no longer possible. Of course, it never was. And it was always, you know, when they first introduced it, it was always just, well, this is the worst case that we can project would happen if we were to do the worst case and all of these things, right? But it was never reported that way. Never in any of the climate reporting do they acknowledge whenever they say, oh, the polar bears are going to disappear in 10 years or this or that. They always say, you know, some climate scientist warns about this. They never mention the fact that the probabilities of these things are like 0.000000001%. They're just a speculative thing. And the problem with climate science, I've said this forever, and I'm not denying that the climate is changing. I'm not denying even that humans might have a cause in it. I'm saying we simply don't fucking know because we silence anybody that doesn't go along with the narrative, just like we did with COVID. And because of that, we haven't had real science. The problem with the climate science that we've had is it's all models stacked on top of models, stacked on top of models, with people theorizing about these models that are stacked on models, with other people theorizing on the theories of the models stacked on top of models. Models aren't real data. They are projections based on data. And the problem is none of these models has ever accurately predicted weather in the future. So if you take a model from 5 years ago, it failed to accurately predict weather till now. Or climate, not weather. Climate, sorry, I apologize for confusing the two, but I mean climate, not weather. Obviously, the weatherman can't even predict the fucking weather, apparently. If you take a climate model from 10 years ago, it failed to accurately predict the climate now. 30 years ago, 40, it doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. During the time it's released till now, no climate model has ever accurately predicted what's actually taken place. Should that not be an indication to us that they're probably not very accurate? Why should I believe that what this model says is going to happen in 100 years is true when it can't tell me what has happened in 10 years? Where else do we take that kind of information as accurate? Nowhere. But anyway, so this article comes from Brian Walsh. He says, you've probably never heard of the term RCP 8.5, the highest emission scenario used by climate scientists, to project the planet's future. But if you've read about climate change, you've seen the numbers and nightmarish outcomes that it produced. 4 degrees Celsius of warming by 2100, sometimes 5 degrees. Sea level rising multiple feet, parts of the planet too hot for humans to inhabit, and those numbers are shaped a decade and a half of climate journalism, including a lot of my own when I covered climate change at Time magazine. I didn't always know and didn't always communicate that the scenario behind the most apocalyptic, attention-getting findings was largely an attempt to imagine how bad things could get, not a true forecast. That's him admitting that he just lied because it was sensational. But I wasn't alone, he says. RCP 8.5 was a frequent background presence in climate journalism. Last month, those scientists who built the scenario formally retired it in a paper published in Geoscientific Model Development. Detlef van Vuuren And more than 40 co-authors eliminated RCP 8.5 from the scenarios that will feed into the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 7th Assessment Report, IPCC, or IPCC, whatever, which is due in 2029. Based on falling clean energy costs, climate policy, and recent emissions trends, the highest emission pathways had become, in their words, implausible. They weren't plausible at the time. And that's the problem, and that's the thing that people like me have been saying the whole time. But of course, we get lumped into just the deniers crowd, right? And you could call me a denier at this point if you want to. I deny that what they report, the catastrophe that they report, is going to happen. People have been predicting doom scenarios since man has walked this earth, and they have never come true. In reality, and the other thing is they talk about, okay, well, the sea level is going to rise and Louisiana is going to be flooded underwater. That could happen. What's not going to happen, and I know this is kind of ironic after Katrina, but obviously a lot of work's been done to fix Louisiana since then, and more is still being done. But what's not going to happen is it's not going to rise 6 feet overnight. It's going to rise little by little every year and move inches inward every year. People will have plenty of time to get out of the way. It's not a tsunami that's going to come and wipe us out if we don't all start driving EVs tomorrow. Never mind the fact that EVs are worse for the environment, but I digress. So I guess you could call me a denier is the point. Anyway, back to the article. He says, I can understand if your eyes began glazing over as soon as you read 7th Assessment Report. But this shift represents real progress and hope. By the way, the emissions, CO2 in particular emissions that Trump's administration just revoked from the EPA were based on this fake report. But this shift represents real progress and hope. It means the apocalyptic climate change future that we've been describing for 15 years is officially no longer on the table. Of course, it never was. Instead, a merely bad climate future, about 2.8 C by 2100, is now the central scientific estimate. Why should we believe that? Why? Given how hopeless our climate future has appeared at times, that really does qualify as good news. Climate models can't tell you the future on their own, because how much the planet will warm depends in large part on what humans do. So scientists build scenarios, structured guesses, about how the next century might unfold under different assumptions about energy use, growth, and climate policy. I've referred to this many times, as have many others. It was predicted in like the year 1900 that Manhattan could never hold more than 1 million people. Why? Well, because for every person, you need 3 horses. 1 horse for the person, generally speaking, and then another 2 for services, trash services, bringing food onto the island and things like that. In order to service 1 million people, it would be about 3 horses per person, and there's no possible way that you could have that many horses on Manhattan Island and people and feed them and keep them warm and all of these various other things, right? What this person couldn't see was that one day a car might be invented, or that one way or another we weren't necessarily going to rely on the horse for all of eternity. And that's the problem with even the most accurate catastrophic predictions throughout time, is they fail to see change. They have to assume if nothing changes right now, this is what will happen if we stay on this course. But we never stay on this course. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, we are always thrown off course. And that's a good thing. I mean, I don't know if it's a good thing. It's just a thing. It's just what happens. And that's why you shouldn't listen to catastrophists. And I'm not saying that there's never a catastrophe that could be avoided, like the levees breaking with Katrina, but that is a man-made problem ignoring a man-made ignoring a man-made argument for why catastrophe will happen because of it. That was a bad way of putting that, but you get the idea. The fact is, the data that we have regarding the climate and weather and all of that, it's extremely limited over long periods of time. We have like 20 years of solid data. That's out of, at minimum, 7,000 years of human life on the planet. 7,000 years of recorded human life on the planet. Okay, so we have 20 years of solid data. We have maybe 50 years or so, going back to the 1970s, of decent data. Now, there's lots of problems with even that data because it's been found before that the people that compile this data were sometimes fudging the numbers a bit or using incorrect methods. Maybe it wasn't intentional, but they were using incorrect methods to capture the data, implying artificial rises in temperature. And how do you correct for that after the fact? If somebody says the temperature was 78 degrees on this day in this place, and the temperature was actually 68 degrees, well, how do I determine that after the fact in this particular location? So we have, moderately okay data going back about 50 years. And then we have sporadic data going back 100 years or so. And then we have, well, actually, probably going back more like 150 or so years. Around the time probably the mercury thermometer was invented, that's about when the sporadic data really starts. And then we have, there's some rare reports about how the weather was during certain historic events and things like that can also be compiled, but that doesn't tell us the temperature and necessary data to include it. It can give us a general trend, but not anything more than that. And then everything before that is basically a guess. Now, there are methods that they use, like the carbon sampling from ice cores and things like that, but frankly, we don't know how accurate that is. There's a lot of assumptions that have to be made in order to come up with a number when you're doing something like that. We have no idea if those assumptions are true or not. And since we have yet to accurately predict things happening, it would seem we haven't quite worked out exactly how to get there yet, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, he continues, 4 such scenarios were introduced in 2011 as the standard set for the IPCC, the international body of scientists that periodically takes stock of global climate research and translates it into reports for governments worldwide. 3 of the 4 were called mitigation pathways, futures where the world worked to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. 1, the infamous and now obsolete RCP 8.5, was the no policy baseline, a future with continued fossil fuel expansion, coal use roughly 5 times higher by 2100, and a global population pushing 12 billion. Think of it like Dickens' Ghost of Christmas Future, a vision of just how bad things could get if we did nothing to change our ways. Yeah, if we assume that it was still the 1800s and it will forever be the 1800s. And just like any dystopia, RCP 8.5 guaranteed attention. Between 2011 and 2020, more than 2,000 climate impact studies used RCP 8.5 as their default future. Almost every dramatic projection of crop failure, mass displacement, killing heat, and coastline retreat that any general reader ever encountered in climate change coverage depended on it. I'm going to read that again. Almost every dramatic projection of crop failure, mass displacement, killing heat, and coastline retreat that any general reader ever encountered in climate change coverage depended on it. All of those projections were plausible enough under the numbers set by RCP 8.5, but by the mid-2010s, Researchers, journalists, and even official government reports were routinely calling the scenario business as usual, a phrase that transformed a stress test into something that sounded like a forecast. It wasn't. And it was never meant to be. Somewhere along the way, though, that distinction got lost. Yeah, I'm sure it was just slipped your mind. The world that RCMP 8.5 assumed will never arrive. Global coal use is on the path to quintuple. Isn't on the path to quintuple, sorry. Consumption has largely plateaued after decades of growth. Instead, the global population ballooning to 12 billion, the UN's current median forecast projects about 10.2 by 2100, with other reputable forecasts putting the number even lower. All things being equal, fewer people means less emissions. At the same time, the clean energy transition moved faster than almost anyone in 2011 anticipated. Did it? And see, this is the thing, the clean energy transition is mostly a lie. If we actually transition to clean energy, we would have all nuclear plants by now. Now, it would be stupid to have all nuclear plants. We should be diversified. But we would be relying on nuclear as primary, maybe dams as well, but we'd have to get past the, river people, the protect the sea otters and all that people, which is a whole nother, climate issue or environmental issue, but regardless, well, the things that we chose to do, solar panels, wind farms, electric vehicles, these things are just as bad, if not worse, for the environment than a natural gas plant, for example. All the emissions are front-loaded, so if anything, we sped it up, because instead of those emissions happening steadily over time, we front-loaded all of them. And the problem is, these things never offset their emissions before they die. Solar panels and wind turbines, to be specific. Wind is the worst by far. I've always said, solar panels, while not the green miracle that people claim they are, they do have strong use cases. But if you're only concerned about the environmental, it's not the solution that we want it to be. It might be very, very soon, because we do continue to make them better. But it's still not there yet. And even then, even at its peak best, you still have the problem of intermittency. You still have the problem of, well, I'm going to need a natural gas plant at night. And it's just not that simple. Because in no world does mining the lithium make sense for batteries. This idea of having mass battery banks, aside from, the incredible likelihood that even if one, let's say we put mass battery banks in every city across the United States, that would mean there would be 50,000 or more of them probably. That's a number I'm pulling out of my ass, but I'm guessing that's probably about what it would take. Feel free to, use an AI to crunch the numbers, give me a more accurate number if you want. You can send me an email, JBU@USA.com, comment on the chat, and I'll see it pop up here. Or you can join the conversation on Discord if you go to Rumble and follow the link to the Discord. You will pop up right here, and you can talk with me live. Rumble.com/user/just between us. Anyway. Even if one of those big battery banks needed to make solar wind viable 24/7 were to catch fire, the amount, and that's almost guaranteed to happen because that much stored energy, like one of them's got to catch fire at some point. The amount of shit, toxic shit that would be released into the air might very well wipe out any good you've saved. Because you already had to mine the lithium, you already had to use exorbitant amounts of energy to convert that lithium into a usable salt for the batteries. And then you had to make all the aluminum for the casings, or steel, or whatever it's made out of, I'm not sure. Could be aluminum, could be steel. And everything else that you need. It's not the miracle that the green movement wants you to think it is. This is as much about a wealth transfer and a or a power transfer, as it is about the environment. I do believe that many of the people that believe in this really think they're helping the environment. I just think that their movement has also been co-opted by people that realize, well, if we're going to shift all energy away, because what is by far the most influence, the most needed thing for a first world country? It's energy. The cheaper energy is, the richer the country. Pretty much exactly. If we're going to shift all of our forms of energy away from what they are currently to something new, well, that means all that power that is held can be shifted to somebody new too. Suddenly, a lot of the things surrounding environmental and climate causes make sense when you view it through that lens. Anyway, at the same time, the clean energy transition moved faster, yada yada. Cost of solar panel fallen 85% since RCPs were published. Yeah, sorta. There's a lot of taxpayer dollars involved in subsidizing that, though, and the idea that we subsidize oil the same is not even close to true. We do not give direct subsidy dollars to oil. We give oil tax breaks, which we also give solar panels, but we also give direct tax dollars to solar panels and windmills. That's very different. We give tax breaks to both, and then we give money on top of that. That's two very different things. Anyway, annual global investment energy transition is now over $2 trillion. Actual global emissions have tracked far more closely to what you'd expect from the world trying to reduce them than from the one doing nothing at all. By 2026, Climate Action Tracker estimated that current policies put the world on course for about 2.6 degrees of warming by 2100. Still serious, but a long way from 4 or 5. Was RCMP 8.5 ever realistic? One camp of experts, led by climate scientist Zeke Hofsfather and energy modeler Glenn Peters, argues that 8.5 was plausible in 2011, but was taken off the table by genuine policy and technological progress. The other camp, led by Roger Pekel Jr., argues that the rate of global decarbonization has been roughly linear for decades. That would mean we didn't actively avoid RCP 8.5, it was just never realistic to begin with. Obviously, I'm in that camp. Both camps agree on what counts, though. RCMP 8.5 should be gone, and the planet is still on track to warm between 2.5 to 3 degrees. I'm not necessarily there, but possible. I'm by no means an expert on this, but I'm sorry, you can't lie to me for 15 years and then expect me to immediately turn around and take your word for what you're saying now. That's great that you fixed a major flaw in your system. Now show me some proof that that was the only flaw. Anyway, sorry, just 1 second here and I'll get back to reading this. I got flipped around here. All right. Nope, that one. There we go. 8.5 was as much a climate journalism story as it was a climate science one. In 2017, the writer David Wallace Wells published The Uninhabitable Earth in New York Magazine. It was probably the most widely read piece of climate journalism of the last decade, and it was built almost entirely on RCP 8.5 projections. Wallace Wells revised his view in 2022, though there has been relatively little coverage of this year's retirement of 8.5. The researchers need to catch up. Pekel Jr. estimated that as of late early 26, 30 new 8.5 studies were coming out each day on average, generating more grist for the climate ultra-doom narrative. We'll see whether last month's announcement finally puts it to rest. Then he goes on, the future's in our hands, and if we just make the changes. Anyway. So, if you heard about that story but didn't have enough details, now you have the details. Obviously, it's a win of sorts, but you know, I'm going to avoid taking a victory lap and saying, told you so, but honestly, that's what we should be doing. Anyway, what else do we have here? There is some other good news too. So, we got to talk about a Daily Beast article here in just a second. Here we go. Okay, so in Florida, the Attorney General has demanded an HOA end the gun ban or face legal action. So a HOA in Florida has a ban on guns in the HOA, meaning if you own a home in that HOA, you're not supposed to have guns in your house. That is unconstitutional, obviously, so it's nice to see it being enforced. Small win for Second Amendment guys out there. I always try to mention those when I can, because obviously we don't get many these days. At first, I kind of thought about it, and I was like, well, you know, nobody's forced into an HOA, and if you want to live in a gun-free HOA, then is that a problem? But it is. Constitution is the law of the land and supersedes all else. And even an HOA, even a voluntary HOA, it's still a structured government organization. Still, you know, it operates like a city or a similar entity. Therefore, it's beholden to the Constitution, and it has to be. Otherwise, what about Sharia law? You see where this goes very quickly. So anyway, just a little good news I thought I'd mention. There was one other thing, too. Pulled out of a joint military board with Canada. Pentagon decision to pull out of a joint military board with Canada that dates to World War II has prompted angry responses from Ottawa as tensions continue to simmer between the U.S. and its northern neighbor. Elbridge Colby, the Undersecretary of Defense, announced earlier this week that Canada has failed to make credible progress on its defense commitments. And so the U.S. was pausing the Permanent Joint Board on Defense to reassess how the forum benefits shared North American defense. So here's yet another win of the Trump administration that, generally speaking, you're not going to hear about because the mainstream media doesn't like to talk about wins of the Trump administration. If you're America first, this is a win. It's not that we don't like Canada. It's not that we want to punish Canada. It's that why are we in an alliance with a so-called ally that isn't doing what they have committed to do? It's very simple. And so, this is one of the things that people like myself voted for. We're tired of seeing America get taken advantage of. It does not matter that we are the wealthiest country in the world. That does not mean anybody can come and take advantage of us because they please. I believe we should be a generous... Matter of fact, that brings me right into this next article here. I'll tell you what I believe here in just a second. Before we get to that article, though, the other win, Harvard faculty, this goes to the video I played at the beginning of the episode, they enacted a cap on A grades. So only 20% of students in a given class can actually get an A. Meritocracy is returning to Harvard. With that, a little bit of sanity is returning to Harvard. This is another win of the Trump administration. Nobody will admit it. But if it wasn't for the DEI crackdown, this wouldn't be happening. Now, I want to see a whole lot of other things happen when it comes to these colleges. However, this is still a win, and it's still worth considering because it wouldn't be happening otherwise. In fact, it would probably be getting worse. But let's move to this opinion piece real quick here. The U.S. must reject the false dichotomy of trade or aid. This comes from Christine Whitman, former New Jersey governor. And I agree with her to some degree. But she does a kind of typical progressive sleight of hand here that's a little frustrating. And apparently, by the way, she was a Republican, just to be clear. I'm not trying to... spin it that she's a Democrat when she's actually a Republican or whatever. She apparently was a Republican, but that was also back in the 90s. So who knows what she, how she votes and all that now. But she does use a typical kind of progressive thing here where she talks about the founding and how this has always been in our DNA. But then when she gets to actual examples, well, see if you spot it here, and I'll point it out, obviously, when we get there. I need just a moment here off camera, so we're going to watch the briefer video on this first.
Advanced Western air defense systems for Ukraine, more artillery and ammunition, counter battery radar, additional ammunition for the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system.
Joe Biden said that the U.S. will support Ukraine for as long as it takes for it to win the war against Russia. A public service announcement issued by New York City last week to prepare its residents against a possible nuclear strike may be telling us just how far Biden is prepared to go. For a country that Barack Obama once said is not a core U.S. interest.
All right, sorry guys, I was trying to avoid taking a break.
Everything on the line for it.
And I thought this was a briefer video, but apparently not.
Hi, I'm David Wu, a former Wall Street investment strategist with a 20-year track record of making action.
All right, David, thank you for that, but that's not actually what we were looking for. So anyway, back to the actual story here. She opens up by saying, for generations, the U.S. has led the world in the fight to end hunger based on the simple belief that American strength is amplified when we lead with principle and purpose. When we invest in the most fundamental human needs, we help create a world that is more connected, stable, and universally prosperous. Yet there is an emerging narrative that we as a nation must now choose between promoting trade or providing aid. This forced binary is built on the idea that the era of U.S. humanitarian leadership has somehow passed. That is, in an investment the United States can no longer afford to make. I definitely would make the argument that we can't afford to make the investment, but we'll come back to that. But trade or aid is a false choice. Trade cannot happen when basic human needs go unmet. I'm gonna try. Decades of humanitarianism, U.S. humanitarianism, has pulled countless millions out of poverty and hunger and produced some of our largest and most reliable trading partners. Has it? I'll explain the difference where it has and where it hasn't in a second, because it has in some places. But we'll come back to that. That wasn't a happy accident of history, but the outcome of strategic American investments in food security, health, and education. The cost of retreat from providing international assistance, particularly food aid, would be immediate, with a long tail of consequences that stretches for decades to come. Could you blame that on us, though? How many decades are we supposed to give the aid? How many decades is it our job to give you aid because you suck at putting a country together? I'm not trying to be a dick, but what is your excuse? Many of these countries we've been giving aid to for 50, 60, 70 years now. And they're relatively the same as they were before. Sure, they have smartphones and stuff, but they've always had trickle-down benefits from the first world. Their society is no more put together now than it was then. Is the aid actually helping? I don't know that it is. Come back to that. The cost of retreat from providing, I already read that. In the short term, hunger will metastasize into conflict and instability when allowed to fester, ultimately requiring more costly, often militarily, inventions to solve. We don't often see headlines of countries spared from the clutches of famine, but these successes are all around us in the conflicts we avoid. In the long term, an American withdrawal from the business of saving lives would be quickly filled by our adversaries through means inconsistent with our values and producing coercive alliances that run counter to our interest. We won't truly discover these costs until we abandon aid altogether. In the slow, methodical work of preparing the next generation of American trading partners and allies grinds to a halt. The most powerful tools of American influence are often the quietest. This year, about more than celebrating our past, it is about reaffirming what kind of nation we want to be. International food aid programs are not relics of a bygone era. They remain our clearest expression of American leadership and strength through generosity. As we look to the next 250 years, we would do well to recognize that aid and trade, like strength and compassion, are not in competition with one another, but are inextricably linked. Doing both is the path to a safer, stronger, and more prosperous world. Okay, so here's the thing. I guess she didn't cite as many, what was I reading then? Anyway, she didn't cite specific things. Oh, you know what? I had AI read this for me, so maybe AI included those things unintentionally. But here's the thing. Our founders were generous. There's no question about it. Our founders believed in doing the right thing when plausible. We have not been giving away aid in this manner since, for 250 years, since the founding. This did not start until the 1900s. And it was a specific change in policy from what we always did to something new. And that something new hasn't helped. So I said, there are places we've given aid and it's worked, and there's places we've given aid and it hasn't. Where are the places we've given aid and it's worked? Well, they're countries that were already first world countries. Britain, France, Europe, and then, South Korea, Japan, China. These are all countries where we have given aid at a time of need, and it has helped them achieve more stable outcome, particularly after World War I and after World War II. But again, they were already first world nations. We've also been giving, Nixon was talking about this, how we had been giving aid to these countries for a long time and it was not helping. A lot of these African, South American countries that we give aid to endlessly, billions of dollars. Now, I don't believe a word she says. She works now, she's a board member at the World Food Program, USA, and former governor of New Jersey. She's just mad that her paycheck's gone. Because obviously, there's a huge grift involved here, too. Nobody wants to ask where the food aid money is going. And that has left us exposed to fraudsters and thieves. I'm glad USA was ended because it was it was propaganda to begin with, but it was bottom-up fraud. Regardless, even with the trillions of dollars in aid that we've given over all that time, what have we got for it? These nations aren't better off. And I don't know that keeping them stuck on the American teat, I don't see how that's going to help. At some point, you got to cut it off and say, figure it out. And I do want them to figure it out. I would like to see every country become a first world country, become a constitutional republic like the United States of America, be successful like the United States of America. I want to be in competition with great countries all around the world. Probably won't happen in my lifetime, but I would like to see that. There is zero evidence, nor did she provide any, that just doling out more aid is going to get us there. And there's a lot of evidence that's going to show us it's just going to get us more of the same. You can't keep doing the same thing over and expecting different results. You can't help people that don't want to help themselves. Europe wanted to help itself after World War I and World War II. They just didn't have the means. We gave them the means. They helped themselves. They paid us back. Africa, let's say a specific country in Africa, because obviously I'm not talking about the whole continent of Africa, but one of the African countries that we give aid to, I'm not going to pick on anybody in particular, I'm just going to say one of them, clearly don't want to help themselves. And so they haven't. And so no matter how much aid we've given them, it hasn't actually moved the needle forward at all. I do believe in giving aid for certain things. I am proud of the fact that any time that there is a major earthquake or tsunami or, natural disaster, there's a war that breaks out among two, very poor nations and you have millions displaced, I'm very proud that it is a U.S. Navy ship that is first to sail into those locations. It's U.S. Air Force planes dropping payloads from above of food and supplies. And I believe in doing that because we are a wealthy nation and it is the right thing to do. That's only a fraction of what we actually do. And the rest of it, I do believe in doing personally. I do believe in helping people that want to help themselves personally. I don't want my government doing it because the amount of fraud makes it not worth it and untenable. Did you know that the American people are by far the most generous people on the planet? We give in private donations more than any government on the planet, more than any group of people, if you were to compare them 1-to-1 even, on the planet. We give at a rate of like 5 times the average European, despite the fact there are more Europeans than there are Americans. 150 million more, to be exact. That's another thing I'm very proud of, and I'm glad that we do it. And that's far more beneficial. Far more than it is a program like you said. Just to, I'm going to share this story again. I've shared it before, and I can't remember where I heard it. It was probably off a conservative podcast somewhere, but it was somebody that used to be an aid worker for a private organization. It was a church-based organization. And he talked about the problem they had, where they would go over to Africa and, they would individually work with, a family and show them, bring some fruit trees for them to plant, show them how to plant them, show them how to establish them. And then generally, it's a tree. It's fine once it's established. And then what you can do with the fruit and the leaves and all of it, how to utilize its resources and allow it to be a perpetual blessing to you every year. How to put in work now for benefit indefinitely. And he said the problem is, we'd show them all that, they'd do it, we'd leave, we'd come back in a year or two, tree's gone. Why? Well, because in the winter, the very first cold, instead of going out and getting wood from somewhere ahead of time, they would just chop down the damn fruit tree because it was right there. And then they would wait for somebody else to come and give them a handout. You can't fix that with more handouts. In fact, a little bit of pain and suffering is the only way to fix that, in my opinion. And it's not like by withholding your money in a case like that, or your fruit tree in a case like that, that makes it you imposing the pain and suffering on them. It's not you imposing anything. What you're better off doing is finding somebody else that is trying to help themselves, help them, and when that person has faced enough hardship that they actually get their shit together, then you come back, and then you help them. Catastrophe is different. And so I'm all for maintaining that And as far as I know, nobody's taken that away. So there's not really anything to argue there. But these, just handout programs, these are not necessary staples of American principles. They're just not. Anyway, I keep forgetting that turning that way doesn't actually take me off the camera. That does. Nonetheless. Let me regather my thoughts here. Where was I at? So I did want to cover this story, but it can wait. It's not time sensitive. Let's go ahead and get to the White House. A man opened fire on Secret Service at the front gate of the White House again today. Let's get into the details of that. And then we'll probably get out of here for the night. Like I said, just a nice little short episode tonight, although we've already been going for a little while now. All right. This one from NBC News. The U.S. Secret Service fatally shot a person who opened fire on officers at a security checkpoint on Saturday in an exchange of gunfire that briefly locked down the White House. So, FYI, obviously, President is safe, and I do not believe any Secret Service were severely injured. I don't know if they were injured at all. We'll find out here in a second. The shooting happened shortly after 6 p.m. when a male approached the Secret Service checkpoint at the 17th Street, Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest, pulled a gun from a bag, and opened fire on officers. Secret Service had said in the statement. The officers returned fire, shot the suspect, who was taken to a hospital where he later died. The agency said the shooting remains under investigation. So, a male approached the Secret Service checkpoint at 17th Street in Pennsylvania and pulled a gun from the bag and opened fire. So it seems targeted. It definitely sounds targeted. A bystander was also shot, according to the Secret Service, but it was unclear who fired the round that injured the person. Their condition was not immediately available. 6 senior law enforcement officials briefed on the matter identified the suspect as Nazir Best. I'll see if I can find any information on them in a second. So, just to clarify, I usually don't say names of shooters like this on the show unless their attempt is an utter failure like this. Then I don't mind talking about losers. Best had documented history with local law enforcement, and 5 senior law enforcement officials said he was history of mental health concerns. How do you get a gun then? Believe it or not, it is illegal to get a gun with mental health problems. Best, who was 21, was placed under arrest on a charge of unlawful entry on July 10th after he walked into a restricted area near the White House, according to a court document filed by the Superior Court for the District of Columbia. So it sounds like it was premeditated. During that incident, he claimed he was Jesus Christ and that he wanted to get arrested. He was known to the U.S. Secret Service for walking around the White House asking how to gain access at various entry posts, according to the filing. In June, he was involuntarily committed for obstructing vehicle entry to the White House complex. The president, who was at the White House at the time, was not injured, according to Secret Service, and there were no injuries to the agents. White House official confirmed the Secret Service briefed Trump about the incident. The NBC News team at the White House heard between 20 and 30 gunshots around 6:04 p.m. A Secret Service agent urged reporters who were gathered outside the North Lawn to run inside the press briefing room. The Secret Service was posted just outside the room with guns drawn as the White House went into lockdown. The lockdown, which included the White House grounds, was lifted at 6:46. FBI Director Kash Patel said on X that the FBI is on scene in supporting the Secret Service. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives is also assisting in the, as well as the Metro Police Department in the investigation. Vice President J.D. Vance was at the White House earlier today, but it was unclear if he was still there at the time of the shooting. The shooting occurred on the west end of Pennsylvania Avenue, a pedestrian plaza that runs along the north side of the White House. Days earlier, part of the plaza had reopened to the public following a months-long closure. Guess it'll be closed again. All right. here's the deal. Yes, the mainstream media, the left's rhetoric, it's responsible for this. It's responsible for these deranged lunatics, some of whom are mentally ill, constantly doing this. We can definitively say that there is an increase in these incidents we have never seen before. And there is no question that the left's shifting of language over time is responsible for this. You can only tell everybody that he's a pedo-fascist rapist so many times before they start to believe you. At the same time, the answer to that is not the government cracking down on these people. I am very much anti that. Somebody has a direct call for violence, that's always been illegal, so be it. Other than that, just calling him a fascist or a pedo or whatever, that's not enough. What should happen is the American people should not tolerate this kind of treason. And I'm not talking about using violence to end it. I'm saying these people should be laughed out of polite society. I'm saying that they should not be hireable anywhere. They should not be welcomed anywhere. They should be treated like lepers for attempting to poison our society with hate and nonsense and propaganda. And another propaganda story, obviously concerning Iran and the U.S. military that I wanted to get into, but I'm going to save that for either tomorrow or Austin and I are looking at doing Monday instead since it's a holiday. But I might come on tomorrow anyway. Regardless, that's how it has to happen. We can't ask the government to step in as much as we would all like to see justice happen. And you can't resort to violence. I got into it with somebody the other day on X here, a conservative, who believed that because he believes that the Democrats under Biden weaponized the government in every way possible, and they did in certain ways. There's no question about it. And because he believes that if they were to get in power again, they would weaponize the government in whatever way possible, that justifies Trump doing the same thing. That justifies Republicans, conservatives, doing the same thing. I don't support that. I don't support using the government to violate constitutional rights. I don't support... We're not at that... we're not at the time of revolution. The Founding Fathers were very patient men. Even until the Boston Massacre. And when I say until, I mean after the Boston Massacre. They sent a final letter pleading with the king for a peaceful resolution. When that letter was ignored, they finally drew the line. But that was after hundreds of attempts. After hundreds of transgressions by the king and his men. They gave every opportunity for peace, but didn't back down. The fact is, in times of chaos, the only thing we have is our credibility. And if we give that up, then why should anybody take our side over anybody else's? The left will collapse on itself because it has no credibility. Yeah, they might do some more damage before that fully happens. But I'm not willing to sacrifice my credibility and my principles to speed that process up. That's in God's hands. Now, I have my red lines, absolutely. But as long as we still have a functioning legal system, which there are many problems, but overall, guilty people tend to go to jail. Innocent people are not. There is no mass roundups of anybody. And leftists, before you even say immigrants, just stop. Nobody is forced to stay in detention for more than a day or two anyway. They choose to stay in detention. They can leave and go home after being arrested by ICE and not have to stay in detention for more than a couple days. They choose to stay and fight their case. Sorry. But anyway. As long as we still have that, as long as we still have elections, and yes, I want to see the SAVE Act passed. I want to see our elections become more secure. But Trump did win the last election. They obviously don't have it locked down. Unless that were to happen, then we could talk about it at that point. But we're not at that point. And I don't know that we'll get to that point. And regardless, I cannot tell you that you must obey the Constitution if I'm not willing to do so myself. That simple. The men we admire most in history were not the first to fire back. They were the ones that did the right thing even when they were oppressed for doing so. And judiciously fighting back when appropriate. But look at Antifa, for example. They believe they're doing the right thing. And understand, it's not exactly the same thing, but it is similar. They think they're doing the right thing. They think that this country is corrupt, that we could have a utopic society if it just worked for evil capitalists or whatever it is, right? It's a shifting target, but regardless, something is wrong with the current way it is. If we could just get rid of that, everything would be fine. So they go around and they burn shit and they break shit and they scream at shit. What do they accomplish? Nothing. Are they right in doing those things because they believe it's for the right reason? Even if I knew, let me rephrase this. And I'm going to separate myself from it. If a man knew for a fact that his government was oppressive, but the only thing that he could do was riot, and that rioting is never going to do anything except harm other individuals, small businesses, the police officers, etc. Understand the police officers have some culpability for participating in the corrupt system, but they are still just individuals. And the fact is, your rioting is not actually going to accomplish anything. Are you justified in doing it? I don't believe so. Now, if you get an opportunity to actually accomplish something, that's different. But even if you know you are oppressed, if what you can do will not fix that, then you're probably not justified in doing it. That's the way I feel about it. And like I said, more than anything, I'm not sacrificing my credibility for my anger. Anyway, don't forget to check out my buddy Austin from the Miller Talk podcast, millertalk.substack.com or x.com/millertalk_pod. You can check out this show, x.com/JBU JBU_show or rumble.com/user/justbetweenus. And remember, you can always go to the description on Rumble, or should be on YouTube too. And you can follow the Discord link, and you can join the conversation with me live. If you want to ask questions, comment on something, whatever it is, feel free to call in. You will need Discord to do that, just FYI. Let's see. I think for today, that's going to have to do it. Let's end on a video. Shall we? Give me just a second here and I'll find something. You know what? We're going to end on this video. Right here. Right here. Right here.
If you
right here. This is one of the best, most well put together arguments I've heard.
We've got 5 minutes. If you would, please make sure your green light is on, and then state your name and title for the record. Thank you.
It is on. My name is Publius Hulda. I'm a retired litigation attorney, and I write on the original intent of the Constitution using the Federalist Papers. I do not go by Supreme Court opinions because for 200 years, the Supreme Court has been ignoring the Federalist Papers and the Constitution our framers given, and they have gone off.
She's absolutely right, of course, although I think 200 years is a little far. I think it's more like 125.
On tangents of their own which have nothing to do with the Constitution. The Attorney General's opinion begs the question. He states that states can't nullify acts of the federal government which are authorized by the Constitution, but then he completely fails to cite article, section, and verse, clause, where the Constitution delegates to Congress authority to restrict our arms. When we ratified the Constitution, we created the federal government. We listed, enumerated every power we granted to our creature, the federal government. Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 1 through 16 lists most of the powers we delegated to Congress for the government, for the country at large. We didn't put on our list that our creature could restrict our arms. We didn't delegate this power to Congress because our framers wanted the American people to be heavily armed. Alexander Hamilton and James Madison write about this in the Federalist Papers. In Federalist Paper number 46, James Madison writes, why the American people are armed. It is so we can defend ourselves, our communities, and our states from the federal government in the event it becomes tyrannical and oversteps the constitutional limits on its powers. In Article 1, Section 8, Clause 16, pursuant to that, Congress passed the Militia Act of 1792, where they required every able-bodied male citizen between the ages of 18 and 46 except for federal officers and employees, to buy a rifle, ammunition, and report to their local militia for training. Pursuant to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, Congress is authorized to issue letters of marque and reprisal. This is what authorizes private warships to make war on our enemies. These were the privateers who fired on British ships during the War of 1812. Our framers contemplated a people who were heavily armed. That is why we never delegated to our creature authority to restrict our arms in any fashion whatsoever. And when the federal government attempts to do so, they are usurping power which they do not possess. The Attorney General goes by court opinions, not the Constitution. There is a vast gulf between the two. We have 200 years of Supreme Court opinions, and Mr. Chairman very kindly shared some of these 200 years of Supreme Court opinions, which have nothing to do with the Constitution. Charles Evans Hughes said over 100 years ago, the Constitution means what the judges say it means. That has been the prevailing dogma ever since, and generations of lawyers have been indoctrinated
That's not
with
what Thomas
this
Jefferson
lie.
said about it.
That is why we no longer have a federal government which is held down by the chains of the Constitution. What we have is ruled by five judges on the Supreme Court who claim the power to do whatever they want to us and our country. So today we have two opposites, what the Constitution says and what the Supreme Court says. Well, your oath of office requires you to obey the Constitution, not the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is merely a creature of this Constitution and is completely subject to its terms. My third point, the AG asserts that the that the Supreme Court is the exclusive and final authority on the extent of the powers of the federal government. But our framers knew that Supreme Court judges were as likely as anybody else to be corrupt, usurp powers, and act lawlessly. So Congress, the President, and the states all have checks on the Supreme Court. Hamilton shows in Federalist number 81 then that Congress's check on lawless federal judges is to impeach them and remove them from office. The president has his oath of office as a check on the Supreme Court. The president's oath is to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. It is not to obey the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was not set up in our Constitution as the superior branch of the federal government. And then there's no need for me to... Well, Madison says in his report on the Virginia resolutions that it is a plain principle founded in common sense that the states, as the sovereign parties to the Constitution, are the final authority on whether the federal government has violated the Constitution, and that the states may check all three branches of the federal government, not just, they may check the judiciary, the executive, and the legislative branches by nullifying their acts. If the judicial branch connives with other branches in usurping powers, our Constitution will be destroyed if we do not stop them. This is what James Madison said in his notes on nullification, in his report on the Virginia resolution. I'm sorry I didn't have time to finish. I hope that during questions someone will ask me about the so-called nullification crisis of...
Unfortunately, we don't get to hear the end of that, but obviously very well put, and I do agree with most everything she said. And I'm not sure there's anything I disagree with, actually. I might have worded some things a little bit different, but that's all. Anyway, it's something that we would be wise to remember, because we do frequently act... Let me rephrase that. We'd be wise to remember because we have an entire legal theory. Nearly 50% of our legal institution, it might be way more than 50%, I'm being generous in saying 50%, that acts on a legal theory that is entirely unconstitutional. It is not grounded in any merit whatsoever and is entirely antithetical to the entire purpose of the Constitution and of the government that our founders set up. That theory, that legal theory, is known as living constitution. Goes by other names as well, but if you Google living constitution, you'll learn about it. 3 of the current Supreme Court justices openly tout this theory. Many federal judges and lower court judges also do. And what this theory says is that times change. And therefore, you can invent whatever meaning you want out of the Constitution. Literally. It does not matter what the words meant. It only matters what they say and what you can invent them to say. Hence the attempts to conflate the clause of the militia with the right of the individual. This is also why abortion was able to be overturned, because it was passed using this theory. Because even though doctors and abortions and none of that is mentioned in the Constitution, healthcare is not even mentioned in the Constitution, they implied that the pursuit of happiness and well-being, well, obviously that includes healthcare, which means that includes abortion. Without getting into the abortion debate at all, regardless of what side you're on, if you wanted it to be law, then you needed to pass a law. If you wanted it to be above law, then you needed to pass an amendment to the Constitution. You can't just have the Supreme Court rewrite the meaning of the Constitution. And that's, of course, what they did originally, which is why it's since been overturned, and rightfully so. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said before she died that it was bad precedent. This whole idea of precedent in and of itself is nonsense. So anyway, I don't want to go on to a whole nother tangent, so I'm just going to leave it there. All right. With that, like I said, I will hopefully be with you tomorrow. If not, I will be with you Monday with Austin. And yeah, with that, uh-oh. Why does this keep happening? Why do you do this to me? With that, my name is Chris, and this has been the JBU Show. Thanks for watching, guys.
Bye. Wait, I want to be a little bit louder.
Yeah.
This is only between us.
This is just between us.
This is just between us.
Perfect. 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 Perfect.